Hi there, it's Skayman. I'm here today to show you some tips on setting up a combine so it performs a little better in the field. There's a lot of little things that just make the combine perform better and makes your life a little easier. So I'm going to start at the front, I'm going to go right through to the back. And the first thing that I like to do is this spring here usually comes in the top position right from the factory, and you need to take it off the top and move it to there. And the reason for that is the pickup, there isn't enough adjustment on the wheels, and the pickup fingers will flip stones up, and the stones go into the combine and it wears the fingers out. So move this to the bottom, and then you have lots of adjustment, and you don't pick up all the stones and do the damage to the combine. On some of the other combines, they have non-swivel wheels, and they're just bolted on here on the side. They do not have enough adjustment. And I usually take and weld a piece of C-channel on the bottom and drill 2 more holes and move the wheels down to stop that flipping the rocks up. And with that, we'll move around to the back of the header. There's the metal pieces that you have to take off, and different pieces of flighting you have to take off so that it feeds the combine properly. And there's a decal on these new Hollands, which is very handy. And they've got for CX, CR, and a CR. And the 2 CRs, one's the narrow throat and this one's the wide throat. And it gives you all the measurements, and they're all here, and they work. They're very good. So just make sure that you have the right amount of blocks in here, and the stripper plates are in the right spot, and it will feed very good. On this particular header, it hasn't been set up perfectly. There's not enough fingers showing up here on the bottom. And what happens when that doesn't have enough, it doesn't put it into the feeder house and doesn't feed properly. And then also, when you plug it, when you go to reverse it, it doesn't get a hold of it to get it out of there, and you're having to take the header off. And I'm going to go and adjust that on the far end. It's very easy to do. And we'll just move around to this far side, and I'll make the adjustment. In here there's 4 bolts, and I'm just going to loosen them. That's all I did. And it should be all the way clockwise unless somebody has had that off the spline and didn't put it back on in the same spot. But that's a good position right there. I'm just going to tighten that. So if we go back to the auger, you'll see that there's more retractable fingers sticking at the bottom. See, now that you can see that there's more fingers sticking out, it's going to feed better, and you're going to be able to reverse it out better. As far as the feeder house, we're going to move over to a different combine, and I'll show you some tips on the feeder house. Now we're at the combine feeder house, and just a few tips on that. You want to kind of keep that drum out as far as you can. Some guys say you should take some joiner links out and keep it back a little bit. I like to keep it out as far as possible. Then it's grabbing it off the auger on the pickup and getting in there. And also when I'm tightening the chain on each side, I like to have the lowest slat about 1 inch off the floor. And then I go and I look on the adjuster bolts to make sure that they're both the same. And then I check that every few days for a couple of reasons. I want to make sure that there isn't a bearing gone in the drum, and you'll see that one side has gone slack, and you know something's up. But the next thing that's very important is these joiner links. If you happen to lose a nut off there, and that chain comes apart and goes into the combine, it does a lot of damage. So I check them every few days, because on some of them they don't have the nuts. There's a wire on there, and the wire wears out and comes off, and the feeder chain also goes through the combine. And I'm going to move around to the side, and you're going to see on the indicator here that it's set between 3 and 4. And that's the perfect setting for your faceplate so that your header works properly. If you're too far one way or another, such as on a MacDon header, you'll tend to drag the adapter, and it doesn't feed right. And that seems to be the magic spot as to where to put it. But if you, on some combines such as the CX combine and the case combines, they don't have that indicator, which is too bad. But there's a trick to it. Measure down approximately 30 inches from the bottom of the feeder house to the ground. So measure down and then take your level, put it on there, and it should be bang on level. And that's the perfect spot to have that feeder house. And it's going to make it feed better. Everything's going to be working way better. I'm going to talk about the stone trap drive, and there's two different speeds for that. And this is the stone trap drive. Right now it's in low speed. The other pulley is high speed. And low speed is the speed that you should run it on all the time. In low speed it's running at 650 RPM, and the feeder house is running at 570, so they're kind of matched. And if you run it in high speed, what happens is it's running at 1100, and it's way too fast. And it's actually grabbing stuff out of the feeder house and throwing it into the cylinder, and at night you'll hear it again. It's going womp, womp. And that's because it's pulling it out of the feeder house and throwing it. It doesn't feed evenly, makes a bunch of noise. And the next thing, one other thing that is good about having a low speed, the big pulley, you have more belt contactors, less chance of slipping it. So it drives better, and with this, when you go to high speed, you have to take this pulley off, and you don't have as much centrifugal force with the extra weight. So the whole stone trap works way better in low speed. This is the new reverser for the stone trap, which I haven't used yet, so we're going to experience that this year. Now we're at the MacDon header, and I just wanted to show you a few aspects about this header. Most headers are the same. You want to use as much pitch on the reel as you can to make it feed properly. Right now this one is set at number 2 on their adjustment, and that's normally okay for most crops, but if you happen to get into large grain, you need to put more pitch on it. And to change the pitch, you just turn this like gold thing, it pops it out, and then you just grab this and you turn it, and you'll see the pitch of the fingers change. So with that at maximum pitch on number 4, you can actually pick stuff right off the ground and lift it up and set it on the canvas. And this MacDon reel is pretty cool. The fingers don't flip over, so you can have it on maximum pitch and it doesn't wind up like a cigar. It's an awesome reel. But it's the same thing on other headers. You need to have the pitch perfect for what you're doing. On this header also, while I'm thinking about it, the guards on it, you want to keep them in good shape. If they're wore down, you're going to see the stubble behind you is ragged. And so you want to make sure that the gap between the sickle and the guards are good. And when you're at the dealership, make sure you get some extra guards. These headers aren't real bad on guards, but there's 3 or 4 different types on this header. So you want to make sure you have the right one so that you're not shut down. And that's about all for the reel right now. We're going to move around to the back to where the drum is, and we're going to show you a tip on the drum. Now we're at the back, and here's the Feederhouse drum. This is a used header, and I kind of went to this one on purpose because it shows better what can happen to these headers. I've seen some of these drums get ripped out, and it's because of the chain coming loose on them from reversing or wear or whatever, stuff like that. And every couple of days you should be getting out, and all you have to do is grab this finger and move it. If it moves more than ½ an inch, the chain in this end needs to be tightened. And if you don't, it could cost you $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000, depending on how much damage it does. So it's worthwhile to get out and check it and tighten that chain up. It's not a big deal, but it can cost a lot of money. And you can see once again, this one is way too loose. Now we're over at the other end of the header where your knife drive is. One thing with this gearbox and also the filter on the main tank, they need to have the oil changed on them after 50 hours. And if you don't do it, you may not have any warranty if you happen to pile it up. So it's worthwhile to do, and it's good to get that fresh oil on there just after 50 hours. Also, the knife has to be running at the proper speed. And some of these older headers are not up to speed, and you should be checking the new ones. This pulley here, for the proper speed for a single knife drive, is 640 RPM. And on on a split knife drive, the dual drive, this needs to run at 670. And if it's too slow, you're not going to be able to travel at the proper speeds, and it gets raggy and you're having to rely on your reel to do too much work. So make sure those speeds are proper. Hi there, I'm back around on the left hand side of the combine now, and I'm going to talk about the rotor, the concaves, my favorite part of the combine. This is where the meat and potatoes are of the combine. And you got to have everything working in there just perfect. So number one thing you need to do is make sure that that concave is square to the rotor. And how you do that is you suck it up to 1/4 inch, and then you measure from either to the rub bar or to the rotor skin. I don't care which one you use, but you need to measure to something and make sure that it's a little bit wider on the inside than the outside. And when I say a little bit, like even 1/8 of an inch is good enough. And how you adjust that is these bolts here. There's your adjustment bolt. You have to loosen these top ones, and then you use that adjuster to move it in and out, and then you measure up through the concave to make sure it's square. This one here, I can tell it is not right. They came from the factory like this, and you can see that there's more threads on this bolt than there is on that bolt. So either that concave is really crooked, or the combine was welded crooked. Like, there's no way it can be that far out, and those bolts should be even. There's no way that it can be that far out. So you need to get that squared up and make sure it's even. Now for the different crops that you're thrashing, you have to deal with this concave a little bit, because some crops the seeds are bigger and easier to thrash, and you want to let out the majority of the crop in the front half of the concave. So when you're doing peas, canola, oats, barley, easy to thrash ones, I pull every other wire on the concave, and I'll just demonstrate pulling one. On some combines they're very miserable to get out. On this particular combine it's very easy. So I've jumped up here and I'm going to demonstrate taking a wire out of this. And so here's one here that I popped out a little bit, and they come out this easy and they go back in. If they're bent and don't want to go back in, you can straighten them or go get some new ones, but they go in and out very easy. So you want to pull every other wire when you're doing barley, oats, anything that's thrashed easy, or big seed like peas, sunflowers. You want to pull them to let the grain out. And then you put them back in if you're doing wheat. Also, the extension is laying here. I've taken it out so we could see that. There's 2 holes for the extension. And the inner hole is for when you're doing hard thrash, as in wheat. You run the extension in the inner hole. And when you're doing the rest of the crops that are easy to thrash, like barley, oats, peas, pretty much everything else, get it in the outside hole. It gives it more room in there so that you can get more capacity out of your combine. Now we're going to talk about the vanes on top of the rotor cage. This particular one has electronic or actuators on top that you can adjust from the cab. This is just something new that they came out with in the last couple of years. Before that, they either came as a fixed vane, which they were welded and non-adjustable, or they were manually adjustable, where you had to loosen 2 bolts, and there's a gold plate with handles on it and you can shift them. My recommendation is to advance them all the way, and I have not seen any time when I would not have them in the advanced position. I had an engineer over here that had been testing combines for 30 years, and something he told me that was very interesting was the longer you make the straw, the less rotor loss you have. And I've been checking that a lot, and he's absolutely right. I had 5 combines that one farmer owned, and he had one that had adjustable vanes, and I advanced them all, and I went to check on his combines when he was combining, and they were dropping their straw, and I could see one combine had longer straw at the back, and I found out that it was the one with the adjustable vanes that were advanced. And I threw grain pans behind him a lot, and then I checked all the other combines that were set the same, and he always had the least loss. So what happens when you adjust those vanes all the way, you're letting the material get out of the combine quicker so that you're not grinding it up. So if you got the wires pulled, you're letting the grain out properly where you're supposed to, and the vanes are advanced, you're moving the product through. And if you have the vanes retarded in the rear position, you're holding the straw in the combine too long, and you're over thrashing it, and then the grain gets mixed with the straw and it gets going around on the rotor, and you can't get it off of there, and you'll get losses. So I've always advanced the vanes all the time. A situation like this with where you can do it from the cab is pretty nice. It's expansive, and I find that you advance them all the way and leave it. So I would recommend just the manual ones because you're not going to move them again. The case combines, they're miserable to move, but same thing. Move them and don't move them back, because that over thrashing just carries the grain out. So you want to pull the wires, let the grain out, and then get that straw out of there because you're done with it. And we're going to move on from there. I like to talk about sieves. I am very, very fussy about my sieves. I want them exactly calibrated perfect. And I want mine to match the numbers in the monitor. So when you're calibrating the sieves, there's actually a step missing that everybody does. And with the extra step I'm going to tell you about, you're going to get them perfect. And when you phone me to ask about settings, you're going to be bang on with the gaps on the sieves. I'm not having to drive there and find out they're not calibrated, and then I don't want to talk to you no more. So the way you do it is you go into the cab. I'm not going to go up there and turn the monitor on and show you that. It's pretty simple. You go into the calibration page and you pick upper or lower sieve, whichever one you're doing, and you pick it, and then you come to the back and you go in and you close the sieves all the way, and then you open it to 6 millimeters or 1/4 inch. And that's what this handy dandy tool is I got in my hand. This hook in here is very important. When you put it in the sieve, you know exactly what you have because you can wiggle it, and it works very well. You can use flat iron, 1 inch wide flat iron, 1/4 inch wide. It works well. This one is kind of unique. It's something I just made because you can't get at the bottom sieve on these now with all the apparatus on the back of the combine. So I can go down through the top sieve and I can feel the bottom one, so I know exactly what I got. So back up to calibrating, you go and you measure to 1/4 inch, and you go back up into the monitor and press OK. And most people think they're done then, but there's one more step. Go back to your main page and go and bump your concave open to 12 millimeters or 1/2 inch, somewhere in there, and then bump it back. Bump it back the same amount of times you hit the switch, and put it back at 1/4 inch, and go back and measure and make sure it's 1/4. You're going to find that sometimes it's not, just depending on the linkage and how everything's working in there. And you may have to do a tighter calibration where it's 1/8 of an inch. I've had somewhere I've had to put my hand on top of the sieve, and as soon as I felt it start to move, I stopped and go and hit OK, open to 1/2 inch, bring it back down, and it's bang on. And when you got more than one combine in the field, you want them all the same, so when you're radioing back and forth between combines, that he's not telling you that you're full of crap because there's not even close to this proper setting. But if you got them all called the same, you're going to find that the settings from one combine to the next are very, very close. So do that extra step when calibrating them, and you're going to get them so that they work very good. The pre-sieve that is in behind this door, some of them now have electronic switch to open and close them, and there's an actuator on there. I've been seeing that they're a little tough to get perfect sometimes, and doing it from the cab isn't working for me. So I'm coming back and adjusting that back here, and when I get it exactly where I want it, and usually where I want it is the gap for the pre-sieve, by measuring it, should be the same width as the kernel of the crop that you're combining. And when I get that exactly where I want it, I'll go into the monitor in Toolbox under Clean, and I'll disable that sieve so it never moves again. So it's exactly where I want it. When I change crops, I enable it again, and I'll bump it open a little bit and check it, and then away we go again. On the older ones, or the ones without this adjustment on there, they have a handle at the back, and you have to go and manually move the lever to move the pre-sieve. And I tell lots of people put it in the 3rd notch, 4th notch, and now I just tell them to make it the width of the kernel, because it's a mechanical rod and there's adjustment on it, so none of them are the same. So you need to just have a quick look at it, and if you have that tube open, there is no air really coming through that pre-sieve. All the air is being diverted onto the sieves, and with no air coming through there, it's just a scalper. So if you have that tube open, the material is going to fall through that pre-sieve. It misses the top sieve, And if you got your bottom sieve nice and open, like how I like to run it, it goes right through there and into the hopper, and you're going to get a dirty sample. So make sure you don't have it too open. First thing that most guys do if they see their samples too dirty, get out there and close that pre-sieve and eliminate that problem, and then you're going to work from there. Also on the sieves, they're never the problem for grain loss, unless they're too closed, and that's operator error. That's your fault, that's not the combine's fault. The reason for loss in combines always is from the rotor. It's either dropping it in the wrong place, or it's getting screwed out the back and you're getting lost there. You have to get that majority of the grain. I like to have 95% out in the threshing area. I don't want any grain coming out in the separator area. I know that's what it's there for, but you've got chaff on top of the sieve and you're putting grain on top of that chaff, and it's going to ride out on you. You want to let the grain out at the front on the grain pan, and then it has time to shake to the bottom. When it hits the sieves, it's going in the tank. And there's one more item on the sieves that I need to mention. On the combines that are coming from Grand Island, they don't have a rubber flap on the top sieve. And what this rubber flap does, it holds the air under the sieve, because otherwise it can go right underneath the sieves and it comes out of those wire fingers at the very back, on the back of the sieve, and it just all escapes. And you'll notice that when you're combining, you're going through a low spot, your returns will climb up and your sieve loss will climb up. And that's because your air just went out those wire fingers, because you put a little more load on the sieve, and now it doesn't want to go through the sieves, it's going through the wire fingers. So the combines that come from Belgium all have the rubber flap in. The ones that from Grand Isle don't have it. And I'm going to give you the part number for that rubber flap, because it is very hard to find in the parts book. There's about 4 different ones and they never get the right one in. So I'll just stop here and I'll get the part number and I'll read it out to you. The part number for that rubber flap that goes in on the sieve, it's fairly easy to install. It's best to go see one that has been installed already, because it will make you scratch your head a little bit as to how it fits in there, but it is actually pretty simple. You take the bolts out for those black wire fingers and it hangs down from there. And the part number is 743083, and you need 2 of them in the combine. And that'll really help your returns, your sample. It'll make setting the combine a lot easier, especially in small grains, canola and that. It'll make it where you're going to see that bumping the fan up 10, 20 RPM makes a big difference in the hopper. It's something I really recommend putting in there. It should be in all combines. And also, I just noticed this pulley here. That's your high and low speed for your sieves. I've never seen a time when you don't run it in high speed. And I've gone to combines where guys are having trouble and it's in the wrong speed, and you're going to get a dirty sample. You want to keep that in high speed, and I've used that in grass, corn, everything. Keep it in high speed. And with that, I'm going to move back to the chopper. There's 2 other little things I'd like to mention, and then I think that'll be the end. We're pretty well around the combine. On the other side of the combine, there isn't a whole lot to mention. There's the clean grain leg that you need to keep snug, but other than that, the other side, there isn't a lot on there. And I'm going to just move back to the chopper here. There's 2 bolt holes here. This one is in the top hole. They come in the bottom hole from factory. And if you move it to this hole, you're going to get 5 more feet spread on each side, so you can get a better spread. And when you're running the big headers, the 40 and 45 foot headers, make sure you get it into that hole to spread it. And there's one other little trick. There's another bolt under here, and this is the grain pan underneath the chopper. And there's 2 holes for that. And you want to be in the top hole. That makes the chopper throw it into the fins better, and you'll get a better spread. Otherwise it just kind of wads out. If you're getting into any green stuff like we sometimes do here when we're doing grass, it'll just wad, and it won't even get into the fins to spread it properly. And I think that's the end of my walk around. And give me a call if you've got questions. See you later.